Okay, Vanakkam everyone. Thank you for joining today's session, Picnic with Panic Series 7. All right, so first of all, my name is S. Mayappa Manikam from Shah Alam, Malaysia. My native is Rachale and my temple is Mathur, Manur. All right, so before I commence or we carry on with the session, just few house rules. Kindly mute your mic. And next thing is, let's say, should you have any questions or clarifications for the speaker, you can always put it at the chat box, and later we will handle it during the question answer session. Right. So as you know, our Picnic with Panic series, the first three series we started with public speaking, all right, because I was focusing more on communication skills. Then I thought, okay, let's go on a motivational strategy. So that's why I called a speaker from India to actually speak on motivational strategies. And then we moved on a career path, all right, something different and something which useful for everyone, especially people who are workforce and stuff. And then what I thought, okay, from career, let's focus also on leadership. So that's where I got speakers who are focusing on non-profit organization, talking or speaking about or sharing the session on servant leadership. All right. So then I thought, okay, let's go into leadership again, but this time is on a different leadership, which is focusing on workforce and especially to a particular group. All right. So, in our so-called generation, at home we always say, நம்ம பிள்ளைங்கலாம் சொன்னதை கேட்க மாட்டேங்குது, சின்ன பிள்ளைங்க சொன்னதை கேட்க மாட்டேங்குது. So but it's the same dialogue when you go to the workforce. The bosses are also saying the same, all right, either directors or the CEO or the managers. Okay, so the thing is that the topic, that's why I chose managing the millennials. The reason is because we have these baby boomers, then we have generation X, then we have generation Y, which is also a combination of millennials and Gen Z. Okay, so this particular group of people are different, and as per Kelly Services International, okay, they are international search executive search firm. They said current workforce, let it to be SME or listed companies or MNC, 50% are the millennials and generation Y. Okay, and in 10 years time it could be 70%. Okay, so it means they will be the major workforce in 10 years time. So it is now how we manage them now, so that we can have a better workforce in future. All right. And the next thing is, 5 years ago, my boss said, okay, in our office, no one can watch or surf Facebook, no one can watch YouTube and go to blog. But my colleague said, you can go ahead with blocking. I have my mobile phone, I can watch it. Okay, I can surf my Facebook or Twitter or Instagram via my mobile phone. So you see, that's the culture. It's different from 15 years ago when the boss said you cannot do something, we tend to follow. All right, but it's different, how to manage. So that's where I actually got a speaker today, all the way from Australia. All right, he has experience working in multinational companies, and currently he's actually the senior audit manager of ANZ Bank in Australia. All right, so he's originally from Penang, Malaysia. So he's now residing in Australia. So now, without much ado, let me introduce the speaker for today, Praveen Nagappan. Over to you, Praveen. The stage is yours. I think you're muted.
I am too muted. Yes, thank you. Good morning. If anyone's joining from a region that's morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Look, thanks, Maya, for the opportunity. So I'll jump straight into it. At the outset, I'd like to caveat this discussion by stating that the generational differences we discussed today is not to be viewed as a negative. Let's set aside any preconceptions of the different generations for the moment. It's not a debate of us versus them and who's better or worse. See, the thing is, at each stage in our life, we have different issues we face, and those within each generation are expected to face similar issues compared to those with the next generation preceding or after, which in turn shapes each generation's differing views, needs, motivations, and ambitions. Look, I'll also in turn share my view on how all of this is relevant to our Chettiar community, where the community has come from, and what this means for our future generations as a community. I'm conscious that the topic may appear to be focused on managing people in a corporate setting, but let me assure you, the essence of what we'll discuss today is as relevant to the Chettiar community of professionals who are hoping to rope in their children into their trade to one day grow their business. It is as relevant to our community as it is to large corporations, so younger people involved in large corporations. So we'll talk through these issues, but let me first start off by defining the difference between these terms, the baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, millennials, and Gen Z, because there can be some confusion caused by this. We don't really need to get into the detail, but I'll just, for the sake of clarifying this, set it out. So in a nutshell, these are basically labels applied to the different generations, loosely defined by the year of birth, not stage in life so much, but year of birth. So the baby boomers is a generation that was born post-World War II, really those born between 1946 and 64 during the post-war boom in birth rates. Gen X is the generation that followed, really people born between 65 and 79. Gen Y comes after that, people born between 1980 and 1994. Now, the latter part of Gen Y is what is called millennials. So the millennials aren't born past millennium. They're actually people born between the late 80s and into the 90s. Then following Gen Y millennials comes Gen Z. That's the youngest generation. So people like my children would be, so the newest generation would be Gen Z, really people born after 1995. Maya, I'll just pause for a second. There's some comments I see coming up saying people can't hear anything. Just wanted to check, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you clearly. It's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Right, so we'll get back to it. So then for the purpose of today's discussion, let's put aside these definitions and focus the discussion on what's different about managing younger people at the workplace today and what drives these differences. Okay, so I'll get through all of this and then we'll touch on how this is relevant to the Chettiar community. And I do really look forward to engaging with yourselves. I know the platform doesn't allow so much of a two-way conversation, but let's try and do that. So towards the end of all of this, after we talk about whatever I've got to sort of present quickly, we'll turn to Q&A. But rather than Q&A, I'd like to treat it as an opportunity for you to share your feedback, comments, any suggestions you have, and we can sort of exchange ideas there. So it doesn't have to be questions. May, is that comment about switching device for me?
No. It's for the others. Right, yeah, okay. You can go ahead.
All good. So I'll touch on the differing drivers of motivations between these different generations we talk about. I'll start there. Look, as I said before, the view is that within each of these categories, people within each of these categories face similar life issues compared to the generations before or after, which in turn shapes that generation's differing views and needs. And likewise, it's also worth noting that it's not only cultural differences, but also the different generations. If you look at the baby boomers compared to Gen Y millennials, they are in very different phases of their financial lives, different stages in their career, and things like that. So that again shapes their motivations and needs. Now, we have to appreciate that many of the younger folk today have the benefit of living with their parents and don't get married if they choose to, or don't buy a house, affordability issues aside, until much later than their parents did. The bulk of essential expenses are also covered in this regard. And so the urgency of holding on to a job and the level of tolerance for displeasure or dislike of things at work is a lot more fluid with the younger end of the workforce spectrum. They don't need to be putting up with the same level of displeasure at work that maybe their parents did, because the underlying need for money, I suppose, can be perceived to be seen as not as great. Then also to understand the motivations of the boomer generation, the baby boomers, it's worth making a quick reference to the generation preceding them. So the baby boomers' parents' generation. So this generation was called the silent generation, or is called the silent generation. Those really born between the 1920s and 1945. It is widely believed that silence and traditionalism were defining characteristics of this generation I laugh because I understand my grandfather's in this call as well, and I know he'll have a thing or two to say about this. Look, the silence and traditionalism was seen as being defining characteristics of this generation, because it's widely believed that speaking out was seen as an unwise thing to do for this generation, which was defined by academic depression. So they called a silent generation. The parenting style of the silent generation over boomers would have undoubtedly shaped the boomer value system, which is a lot more conservative than what you see in more Gen Y millennial type characteristics, setting the scene also for the differences, the potential clashes, conflicts between the boomers and now the Gen Ys and the millennials. So then what motivates the younger folk at work? The answer to that really lies in understanding our team members. And how do we do that effectively? We need to work on establishing a trusted relationship, one built on the foundations of mutual and reciprocal respect for each other. Moving away from the traditional paternalistic relationship where I know better because I'm more experienced and therefore I shall tell you and you shall execute. If you're fortunate, over time you learn how to do things and think like me. Now, that model doesn't work anymore. It's not going to work. And if you insist on doing that at work today, you're going to quickly start losing really good people who happen to be younger. So that model doesn't work anymore. So we need to gain the trust of our younger workforce. And to gain the trust of the younger end of the workforce stream, one younger end of the workforce spectrum, who rightly or wrongly may feel that they had a certain advantage being on top of new trends and knowing better, we need to come across in their eyes as value adding to whatever the subject matter is. Now this is a tricky thing, because this is a tricky thing because it's a bit of a balancing act. So while we need to gain their trust, it also needs to be reciprocal. It's a delicate balance between us being seen as there are things for you to learn from us. So you can't move away from sort of teaching the newcomers things. So you can't move too far away from teaching, but at the same time, it's a delicate balance between the things for you to learn from us, for things for you and I to learn from each other, both the generations, compared to the attitude, compared to coming across as, you sit down now, I'm going to school you on something. So that will really be off-putting and that will be demotivating. So we need to be personable, we need to be approachable, and we need to show the younger folk at work that we care. At times, this may mean that we allow ourselves to become vulnerable and we be transparent with problems we have with our bosses, which may not involve the younger folk at work, but we come across as, I value your advice, I value your input, and therefore we demonstrate to them that we value their input and it's not a one-dimensional relationship. Of course, there are also cultural differences between locations that come into play. So as Maya mentioned, I'm in Australia. Maya's in Malaysia, and some of you on the call are from India and other places. So there are definitely cultural differences that come into play. There is, of course, commonality in how each of us is brought up, yet there's also a lot of differences. For example, these cultural differences and upbringing shape our attitude when it comes to providing challenging feedback and constructive criticism to subordinates. So if it's hard enough to give feedback to subordinates, you just need to imagine how hard it is to give feedback to our superiors who happen to be boomers now. So those cultural differences do come into play and they need to be considered as well. But on this point, right, so Maya asked me to consider today if there are any differences between managing millennials from different continents, such as Australian millennials and Asian millennials. The answer to that, Maya, is no, there isn't, because Maya, guess what? The Australian millennials today happen to be Asian, thanks to migration. So not much of a difference there, but cultural differences to be considered. So how do we attract and retain millennials at the workplace? So first thing first, whether to hire millennials at the workplace shouldn't even be a question, because that question is simply asking ourselves, do we want to evolve with times or not? Because bear in mind, as the workforce becomes younger, so does the consumers of our services. So to be able to cater for those with changing views and needs, we as service providers need to evolve our level of service to suit the changing landscape. Otherwise, we are left with an expectation gap. And as a business, we'll eventually fail as well. Some of you may have heard the term disruption used in various industries. This is essentially a fresh new look at how mature services can be delivered. And in this disruption, there emerges problems and opportunities that would have otherwise been seen as being catered for. Innovation in ways of doing the same things, sending more innovations in new ways are starting to send some mature industries into sunset. So some good examples of this is in the gig economy. So things like ride-sharing apps, Uber, Grab, and food delivery apps like like Food Panda and others. So services that was already seen as being catered for, and all of a sudden there's a boom in these industries because someone came along and said, why do we need to keep doing things the same way they've been done for decades now? I'm not going to catch a taxi. I can book a car through an app, and it's easy, it's convenient, it's paid for easily. There's no negotiation, there's no hassling, there's no haggling of prices. So it catered a latent desire, latent need, because someone decided to challenge the status quo. So we need to attract and retain millennials at the workplace to drive some of this innovative thinking. And to do this, we need to be open and allow them to challenge us. Now, that's going to take a level of confidence to do that, because we are seen as people who are experienced and know what we're doing. So to suddenly down our tools and allow people to challenge us can be quite confronting. But that's what we need to do to attract and retain these people. So to retain the younger folk, then specifically to retain them, like any staff, it is important to gain their trust, to understand from them what they most value, and reward them with more of that. So this could be money, which is a constraint. It could also be opportunity to research, study, or simply allowing them more time to explore whatever it is they're passionate about work. Of course, underpinning all of this is the delivery of services to our clients. This should not, so the one's interest in pursuing something that satisfies them should not come at the expense of delivery of our service to our clients. Now, if that does happen, we should be open to helping each other find an amicable solution, even if that means parting ways. It is often said that the main driver for millennials is job satisfaction, and they'll stay if they're happy with the job and what it offers. This may be true, but in my experience, the same is true for everyone, even those in retirement or nearing retirement. Those in retirement often continue to do whatever they've done over the years, even in a voluntary capacity, purely for the passion of what it is. So it is a job satisfaction that keeps these people engaged in what they do. So as much as job satisfaction is important for millennials, it's equally important for everyone. My personal experience at work, both in my current role in ANZ and in my previous role with PwC, I've had the opportunity and pleasure of working with many newcomers and graduates over the years, some of who didn't last more than a few months. There are also those who I was fortunate to be able to coach over the years, mentor. And among them, I've also encouraged a number of them to move on to other roles or organizations even, because that's what's worked best for them. Now, what defined me in my career and what shaped my culture was those who mentored me in my formative years at work. Of course, there were those who genuinely cared for me and those who simply treated me as a resource. I learned over time, though, to accept all of this as fact and to embrace and champion those traits that I found encouraging, and to retire the less desirable traits. In return, what I've experienced is pure joy at work. I've managed to maintain a positive relationship with my team members who would be open and transparent with me in ways they aren't with my peers. And with this comes a sense of team spirit and loyalty, something very difficult to achieve in a large organization, I must add. Yet the simple traits I've mentioned before, trust, being open, being vulnerable, all of this helps to make it possible to build that support network even in a large organization. So conflicts that may arise then out of all of these differences we speak about, given the differences and distinctions I've outlined, it wouldn't it won't be hard for you to reflect on some of the common conflicts and problems that may arise. I won't go into detail because some of it sounds really negative, but it's common. You won't be surprised to hear things like the younger generation at work, they lack motivation, they are lazy. And on the flip side, if we fail to impress the younger folk at work, even us more experienced people could come across as being out of touch, starved of ideas, or simply old-fashioned. Why must I listen to this dinosaur? I know better because I've just finished university. I'm the top of my class. I'm the cream of the crop. What can this old timer offer me? So these are potential differences that can come up. So these are probably perceived differences, even they're probably not even actual, they're probably not even real. But there are things that to recognize and address. To overcome this, as I've already mentioned, we just need to invest time in gaining each other's trust and understanding each other. If there's one message I'd like for you to take away from today, it's this. All we need to do as a starting point to gain each other's trust and overcome these conflicts is we need to start placing ourselves in each other's shoes, right? So once we start placing ourselves in each other's shoes, all of a sudden we allow ourselves to look at things, look at problems, look at issues, look at situations through another person's perspective. Now, in placing ourselves in other people's shoes, we should not be doing it for the sole aim of trying to figure out what kind of arguments this other person may come up with, and then as a result of that, counter arguments we may come up with. Not that. It should be purely for the purpose of trying to understand this person and trying to help them, and likewise them with us, right? So if we can achieve this, then as a workplace, it'll be a lot more conducive. We can overcome a lot of these conflicts. Now, if you are a self-employed professional or own a small business and wish for your children to come on board and one day join you and grow your practice, be open and transparent with them. Understand their ambitions, understand their interests, and what motivates them. And if there are things that need to be put in place to bridge any expectations gaps, start planning for that. But also be prepared equally that they may simply not be interested to join you in your trade. So I'll lastly come to how is all of this relevant to our Chettiar community? Because this is something that is of great interest to me and in fact all of us, and something we need to think about. So how is this relevant to the Chettiar community? Where have we come from? And what does this mean for our future generations? Many of our forefathers, as we all know, were involved in trade and more often than not money lending. We saw them journey to faraway lands from our homeland. And over time, many in our community turned to profession, right? So became professionals, doctors, engineers, auditors, whole spectrum of things, which offered better security and certainty. Many have continued to prosper in these professions with accolades and recognition, well-deserved accolades and recognition, something to be proud of. However, what this has also meant is that each successive generation starts afresh rather than building and growing what was left for them, and growing the family trade as a result. In Malaysia, we have seen how successful Chinese Malaysians are at doing this. And in the end, there's a family business passed down from generation to generation, with each successive generation leaving its own mark on the business. Now, I've seen the successes of this, where a number of businesses with humble beginnings today publicly listed. So if the Malaysian Chinese community could do it, we should be able to do it as well. Now, we as a community today need to consider how we can grow our current trade and bring our children and grandchildren along that journey. There's certainly opportunity here to do this. But the starting point for all of this comes back to today's topic. How do we bridge the differences in views, ambitions, interests, goals between our different generations? So that's everything I wanted to share. Maya, I welcome your input to start with based on your experience. You and I are not that far off in our career journeys. So I look forward to some input from yourself, and then maybe we can engage with the others in further conversation.
All right. Thank you, Praveen. It was a great insight and definitely a lot of take backs, inputs like invest time, build trust, job satisfaction, and placing each other's shoe. Actually, one thing I want to share was in my career when I started, we used to have this mentoring structure where, either your manager or your director will become your mentor, your counselor. So every quarter or every half yearly once, they will actually catch up with you, try to guide you on things. But nevertheless, last 2 years, I've actually experienced on something new called reverse mentoring, where you as a junior, you actually give input to your superior, all right, or someone who's actually higher rank than you. Is actually for them to get know what is actually in the market and what is the current practice like, what are people looking forward. All right,
Yeah.
so as I said, generation Y or the millennials, they are the one going with the future leaders. So you need to
Mm.
actually build something for the future. All right, so that's where this reverse mentoring comes in. And those days in my office, there used to be cubicles, there used to be rooms for directors, CEOs. But to be honest, my current company, it's all open concept. There's no cubicle, there is no rooms. Okay, you can just walk to your general manager or the CEO's table and just have a chat. All right, so because that's the open concept that they are feeling, and that's how they bridge the gap. All right, so at least they feel it's more like an open door concept. They feel that only there's no much of a position or bureaucratic thing. It's more on the company's value, all right, or the company's future itself, where they invest on people. Okay,
Mm.
so that's something which I've experienced. And like what do you say, job satisfaction. So nowadays, people don't really go for the money; they go for the value that the job gives. All right, and sometimes they also go for the perks rather than just the money alone. All right, do you have a coffee machine? Do you have a sports club? Like do you go weekly bowling or weekly futsal? The
Yeah.
best part, even in my office, they have a stress room where you have a massage chair and a football table, so people can just go and have a short massage. And if they are feeling so stressed, they can just have a coffee and go play their football. All right, so that's something, a change which I saw compared to 15 years ago when I started
Yeah.
my career. All right.
Yeah. Fascinating. Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. True. Especially when you come for sports section, right? When you want to say, okay, let us go for a football or something, then we come back and work. 15 years ago, there's no.
Mm.
But to nowadays, it's different. Okay, it's like part of the package.
Mm,
Okay,
mm,
when they
mm.
call it work-life balance kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it makes sense because when you mentioned
Mm-mm.
earlier at the start of all of this about social media and how,
Mm-mm.
at the start, you're not allowed to
Yep.
go on social media at work and things like that.
True.
So I do have that experience because they start with,
Mm-mm.
they block out access to social media at work. And then eventually work realized that, even to attract one, new talent, and two, to sell services, they need to themselves have a presence on social media. So
Mm-mm.
things have definitely
True.
changed. Mm,
Correct. Correct.
interesting.
And those days when you say working from home, it's like a taboo. How can you work from home? Definitely, you won't focus. You would not
Yes.
finish a job. But now
Yes.
the situation became such that you had to work from home.
Yes. Almost as a given.
Yeah, correct. And certain
Yeah.
countries, they prefer you to work from home. They give you all the devices and stuff. You just work from home. You know.
And what do
So
you think about what you say? Do you have any views about how this applies to Chettiars? Because that is of particular passion to me. I mean, and all of this, right? I
mm-mm,
mean, we're all employed people and all of that. But
mm-hmm,
how this applies to the Chettiar community, that is of interest to me. People being brought on to the family trade and things like that.
mm-mm.
Do you have any views on that?
For me, the working from home thing is, at least I can bridge the gap. I can now see my sons more.
Yeah.
And let's say if there's anything that, your groceries or daily routine stuff, we can still settle it. So at least there's still connection.
Yeah.
And the so-called the chaos of you staying at office for at least 12 to 14 hours, you can actually eliminate that. Some people say you're going to microwave oven for that 14 hours and you're coming back, you tend to have that mindset of the work stress. You show that to your family or your kids, but now your kids are around, so at least you can de-stress yourself. That's
Yeah.
one way.
Yeah. This is true.
And
This is
of course, your wife or your kids would not complain that I don't see my dad at all.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you're
This is true.
there all the time, and
Yeah,
you get to settle all your errands on time, at least for now.
yeah, yes, true, true.
Right. All right. So for the audience, if you have any clarifications or questions, you can post it on the chat box, or you can ask the speaker itself.
Why would it be too much of a logistical nightmare to have people converse?
Okay, if shouldn't be a problem, or else the chat box would be the best for them.
Okay,
But then you
okay, that's all
can
good.
handle it. Yep.
So what I'd be interested to see is like, look,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to take the view that I'm know it all, or I'm here
Mm-hmm.
to educate anybody on generational differences or whatever the
Mm-hmm.
topic is. Um,
Correct.
I would really like to understand any comments or any suggestions, even work
Mm-hmm.
experiences like what Maya and me have shared in terms of
Mm-hmm.
your own experiences coming through work. There's some people who are a lot more experienced on this call. You've seen a
Mm-hmm.
lot more than some of us, and
Yep.
what you've seen over time, how things have
Mm-hmm.
changed, how attitude at work has changed. There's some people into their 70s and in fact 80s on the call that I know of.
Yep.
So I'd like to understand your perspective, no matter what your trade is. You
Mm-hmm.
could have been engaged in professional services, serving the government, whatever it is. It'll be quite interesting to see how you've seen things change, what you've
Mm-hmm.
learned over time, and how that can apply to us. That'll be
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
All right. So there's a question here. So it said that elderly generation remain faithful to the employer. They work for one employer for 30 years or more. But the present generation wish to change jobs frequently. So is this change we need to expect in future?
I think it's a given.
So, yep.
Unfortunately, hey, and you see, I have a particular view about this because
Mhm,
I was personally with PricewaterhouseCoopers for 10
mhm,
years.
mhm.
It's not 30 years, but it's 10 years.
Yeah.
But a decade later, you realize that loyalty works actually both ways. So loyalty is not just about employees staying with employer for long term. Loyalty is also about employer looking after the employee for long term. Over time, that has changed quite drastically. Uh, Circumstances have seen that change quite drastically. So in today's generation, unfortunately, profits have always been the cornerstone of any company. So returning profits to shareholders, shareholder returns up there. Other things, of course, important. But today, more than ever, if the tables were turned, companies wouldn't take too long to let people go in a moment's notice. Uh, I'm not saying that's right or wrong because some of you may be shareholders in companies and that may be what is better off for you. But loyalty does work both ways. So staying in a company for 30 years is a great achievement, and working your way up the ladder. And see, that aside, loyalty aside, also you have to understand whether my view, sorry, I don't mean to sound like I know everything, but my view is if you feel you're not getting anything, you're not learning anything new after a number of years in a role or in an organization, then you're not doing yourself a favor by staying in that role. You're not doing the best you can for yourself and also for your employer, because you get bored and you're not as sharp a tool as you used to be because you don't like your work or whatever the driving force was, is mellowed over time. And that's why people end up leaving after a while. Um, and I think if you're leaving for those reasons, I think I, as a mentor, have actually encouraged people to move on for that very reason. Um, but then there are those who leave for the wrong reasons. 2 months in, it's like, what, this doesn't work for me because the commute is too long. I don't want to be on the road for so long and I want to find something nearer my house. Things like that. Well, look, each person to their own, but I think that comes with a level of maturity. You got to see what's important in life for yourselves as well, you see. So
Mm,
yeah,
true.
that's my view on that.
Yeah. Actually, I would like to share on that question in addition to Praveen's quote. People leave not because of the company or the salary, it's because of the boss. okay, the superior. So if you have a good boss, definitely people will stay. And the boss should be also the mentor, to the guide or a career coach. All right, then definitely more of your subordinates would tend to stay. All right, but nowadays, as you know, the millennials, they don't like the hierarchical or a master slave or boss employee kind of thing. They prefer more like a buddy style. All right, so they still prefer a manager can come and say, hey, hi bro, how are you? Hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Okay, can we go for a coffee kind of thing? If it's 15 years ago, no way a manager will come and ask you, can we go for a coffee? So that's a cultural change that the millennials are expecting. Okay, and
This is
of course, another thing like what Praveen said, job satisfaction, and people must grow. Okay, you cannot be doing the same thing for 6 years or 10 years, and you become like within your comfort zone. So people want to move out. So even when I was actually in an oil and gas company a few years ago, so after the third year, I don't see myself moving on. Okay, my job became mundane, routine. Okay, although it was a good, but the job became mundane. So I was already in my comfort zone, and my boss said, either you stay here or you just get out from the company. So I had to move for the later thing. All right.
yeah,
So that actually answers the question.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions or comments? People might be finding it, I'm just conscious people might be finding it a bit hard to type things out
Mhm.
if they wanted to say
Yeah.
something. Oh, there are actually quite a few coming through now, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. What is a thought to be inevitable or necessity has changed during the COVID lockdown days? Work from home is one such thing. So many companies are reviewing organization structure. What is your view on this gig economy? Right. So Praveen, you
Uh,
wanna?
so let me just read that. Sorry. What
Okay.
was
So.
thought to be inevitable or necessity has changed during the COVID. Yes, true. Work from home is one such thing. Absolutely. Many companies are reviewing the organization structure. What is your view on gig economy? Okay, so I'll take this in two parts, right? So yes,
Mhm.
absolutely agree. Even the what was seen as a need, which was to go into work to do certain things, has changed, as Maya mentioned before, which is
Mhm.
very true also as well what you've said here, Narayanan, I think.
Yeah.
It's true. We no longer need to go into work anymore. And the beauty of it is and you'll suddenly discover, and your bosses now have discovered, that you can actually get what you need to get done from home for the most part, unless you're in essential services, you're frontliner, you're a doctor or something. Even in that space, there are certain things that, they ask, encouraging you to do over the phone and things like that. So that's wonderful. That's actually a great thing coming out of this. But also in my company, in the bank, for example, they're talking about some people, believe it or not, I enjoy working from home right now because I get to spend a lot of time with the family, the young family. But a lot of my colleagues who don't necessarily share those same traits, they can't wait to get back into the office. It's bizarre to me. I don't know
Mhm.
why, but they're just waiting to get back into the office. And I'm going, what's wrong with you people? But they want to get back to the office soon. Um, Now, there's also some fear out of all of this. Now, there's some fear on what does this mean for the office as a space in the longer term. Now, all of a sudden, companies realize, you can be working very effectively from home. Why do we need an office anymore? Or why do we need so big an office? Can we downsize? Now, there's a lot of fear around things like this, right? So the word restructure is a scary one because that could mean less people, less role. Do we need as many people doing this and that in the office if the office itself is going to go smaller and so on? So time will tell. Unfortunately, all they've been telling us at work even is calm down. We don't have any more to share, but not to worry. We are not looking at reshaping how work is going to look like. I think COVID, one aspect of it, but I think underlying the health of the economy is a scary part. So I think if there's
Mhm.
anything to do by way of a restructure, it might be the latter, the profitability as a result of the economic cycle that may affect those sort of decisions. Now, the gig economy, then lastly, coming to the point on gig economy, I don't know much about the gig economy. I'm definitely a user of the service, but I think it's a good thing because it offers, at least at this point, if you look at the social aspects around it, it offers people two positive attributes at least. So one, for people employed in the gig economy, it offers them some compensation for loss of income in some other space, maybe. We hear a lot of cases where people who are pro athletes, I think in Malaysia, there's this one guy who's a pro athlete or weightlifter, now he works in the wet market, which is, well, it's not gig economy, but it gives people an opportunity to look at doing things differently. I think in Singapore, there's CEOs who are doing delivery of food and things like this. So it gives people other opportunities to look into. But I also read, it's not foolproof, because I also read recently that I think it was Uber here, for every one order, I think it's Uber delivery, which is food. For every one order that comes in, there are 50 people waiting to take that order of delivery, which is crazy. So but it does have its pros. Now, from the consumer end of it, so things like food delivery and that, for people who are in the older end of the spectrum, when this COVID thing was at its peak and people were staying at home, didn't want to go out to the shops and things like that, this offered a way of people getting things delivered as well. So it definitely has its pros socially, and academically it does provide some cushion to what we are experiencing. So I think that answers that question. The next question, Maya.
Okay, so basically, if you're a Gen Y and you're a middle level manager, so you basically have your C-suite and you have your juniors below. And what is the best way to manage the millennials, as they are quick and the baby boomers are different sort of opinion to kind of set up so it's a different expectation, I would say.
Yes.
And a Gen Y is in a kind of dilemma, especially when you are middle level managers, you are stuck in both world, kind of thing. So how can we take this on, especially in big MNCs or corporate companies?
Yeah. So basically this is typical, right? So basically what we're talking about here is people stuck in between. You're sandwiched. So as middle managers, you're sandwiched, right? You're managing below, and you're also managing upwards. You're managing expectations upwards, and you're also managing the expectations of your juniors. Now it's difficult. It is a difficult place to be in, but it's a place where a lot of us are in this stage in our careers. So I think what I found helps with all of this is the transparency. Now, in my teams, I have people delivering on tasks, which I then need to consolidate into. I need to consolidate the different moving parts, different things found into a cohesive thing that gets delivered not only upward to my chain, but also to stakeholders. So it is important, if I'm not getting something, or if something's not meeting my expectations, to then move the message upward, to pass that message upward. It's important that I'm transparent to those who report into me, those who are performing the tasks. It's important that they understand over time what the big picture is. Because if each of them look at something as, I'm only producing a result for this task, it's only a piece of a puzzle. It doesn't matter. Once I produce the piece of the puzzle, I'm done. No, it isn't, because you need to be able to see that whole puzzle and how your piece fits in the big picture. Because without that, there's no point in whatever you're doing. So it is important that they understand, they appreciate that. And it is important that we as middle managers are comfortable to provide that constructive feedback. Now, that can be a bit uncomfortable for a lot of people. Not suggesting it'll be uncomfortable for yourself here, Ramaswamy, but I'm sure you've had your own experiences that you might share given the opportunity. But it is important that we provide constructive feedback, that our team members understand and start working on those things, because otherwise we're going to be stuck in a never-ending cycle and never getting what we need from those reporting into us to then feed up, and then passing those messages down as well to those performing the tasks. Maya, do you have anything else to add on that?
Okay, maybe I can add on the middle managers, where when you have both side of world, right? The important thing is the value or the objective. What are you focusing on? So that is crucial. What end of the day, what is expected from us or from the team itself? And the next thing is, as what Praveen said, the constructive feedback. Those days you have a once a year performance evaluation. So only end of the year, your boss will call you to the room and you have a discussion. So that is a traditional way. But nowadays, the millennials, they don't expect that. They want immediately, what is my feedback? How did I perform? Okay, so it's there and then. So it's like a continuous improvement. So let's say there's a task. After every task, you have to give some feedbacks, or even during the task while it's going on, you give them some feedbacks. So at least they can improve it during the task itself or the project. So it's an ongoing mentoring, kind of thing. So you don't need to wait until end of the year or end of the quarter or something for you to give feedbacks. So that's one way where the millennials are the way they want to grow, because they want to grow fast. Okay, that's one thing, because the technology or the environment is such which motivates you to go fast. All right. So
Yeah.
that's one way.
Yeah.
And actually, coming to the gig economy, right? The key word for the gig economy is flexibility. You need to be flexible. Those days when they say, okay, I want to be accountant, I will just look at numbers. That's it. They will be merely a bookkeeper or accounting manager. Just stay there. Okay. But nowadays it's different. Being an accountant, you can be an advisor, a consultant based on the finance results. Okay, that's one. Or you can be also a lecturer. Okay, or you can be also a person who actually try to audit another person's figures or data. So you have to be flexible. Just to share one of the experience, one of my friend who was working in an airline company, the airline company was doing actually quite bad for the past 3 months. So they were actually jobless. So what she did was, she knows how to do makeup. So she started doing an online class on how to do makeup or how to groom yourself. Okay, so this is how she came out from her actual work, which is on being a stewardess. She started doing online grooming classes. All right, and one of the steward, he's actually a fitness geek. So since last 3 months he was not flying, so he started teaching online fitness classes. Okay, so because a lot of them are staying at home, so they need to do workout. So this is a time you use the opportunity, and the laptop is there or the devices are there, so you just need to make use of it. So the flexibility is crucial. So you cannot have a tunnel vision, or you cannot like think straight, being a squad, or you need to be creative here, and flexible is what I say.
Yeah. No, certainly the current situation we find, the current operating environment we find ourselves
Mm-hmm.
in, a lot of people have actually thrived in this environment because they've
Yeah.
been able to look at things through a different lens. When other people saw
Mm-hmm.
problem and we got to stay at home, we can't do
True.
this and that.
Correct.
Certain people just really, I mean, it's embarrassing to say that we don't have this
Mm-hmm.
skill because a lot of people have been able to thrive in this environment and do things like what you've
Mm-hmm.
said. Because
True.
under normal circumstances, you would have never thought about, like your friend, doing this maybe. It might have been something that's latent at the back of their mind that maybe I want to do
Mm-hmm.
this at some point, but never did.
Yeah.
But I think this
Correct.
environment has helped some of these people. So maybe that's one positive coming out of this, despite all the
Mm-hmm.
despair.
Yeah. Correct.
There's one more question.
Okay.
I think, in fact, that may be from my grandfather.
Okay. This one, do you honestly feel mentoring will work either forward or reverse, as mentioned by Maya these days, of artificial intelligence? Will not youngsters claim that they know more than their mentor?
Very likely. I think very likely. And that is a problem, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
Maya, feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
But certainly in my previous role with PricewaterhouseCoopers, the kind of people who used to come in through the graduate role, they used to be the cream of the crop. Only the
Mm-hmm.
best of the best who finished university got in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that was the level of assessments they had to go through to get in. So when you get these people come in, and then they look at you and they go, "Well, I'm the cream of my crop. What could I learn from you? I already know everything there's to know." Um,
Yeah.
and soon they find themselves burning out because of other reasons. Because it's not just about book smart. It's not just about what you read.
Mm-hmm.
It's the how do you apply all of that in real world?
Yep. Yep.
How do you apply what you've learned in real world? The cockiness, the cockiness drops off when you start realizing you're not actually getting
Mm-hmm.
result from it. Uh, and some people just remain like that, and you just park them aside and just focus on what gives you positive, what makes you feel positive. The point about artificial intelligence, that's a good one, because yes, it's true. It's in a world of artificial intelligence now. There's a lot of data, data-driven smarts, data-driven intelligence. Businesses are very data-driven these days. So so AI and data together is making a lot of roles redundant, and I think there will be a lot more of that to come. A lot of things are going to the cloud. A lot of things are going down the path of technology. A lot of things are being disrupted, right? So there's two ways to look at this. One is, yes, that's going to cause a lot of disruption, but with that, there also comes a lot of opportunity, right? But I think that's not the nub of the question. The nub of the question is, with all of that, then what do middle managers and what does mentoring have to offer on top of all of that? Now, mentoring, of course, there will be technical mentoring on those very aspects, but also mentoring is very much, as you grow in your career, it's about people. It's not about the technical aspects, but it's about people. How do you manage problems? Because behind every problem, behind every computer system, behind every consumption is a person. So how do you carry yourself in a meeting of 10 senior stakeholders? No matter how smart you are, no matter how cream of the crop you are, no matter the latest device you have with the latest data in it, you need exposure to that. So there's always going to be people elements that you can learn um, from others. Now you have to, of course, accept that you can learn from others first, and then you will benefit. You're likely to benefit. So I think that's where mentoring can help, even in this current environment with data and AI and things like that.
Yeah. And another thing is, again, coming back to the flexibility, because whatever things that can be automated and you're doing a routine job, that means you are at the risk, okay, because you may lose the job. All right. So one way is either you tend to develop yourself or be flexible on looking at different path. All right. So otherwise, AI will actually kill the whole thing, because nowadays the bookkeepers, you don't need them anymore because the system can do it. But you still need a finance manager, you still need an audit manager, to audit the figures. So you still need something, to actually look after or overview or analyze things. Okay, but nothing which is whatever routine stuff, it will be gone. Definitely AI will take over one day, right? And yeah,
There's
that's what.
another question on KPIs. So
Yeah.
particularly, okay, so those on the call who may not be familiar with the term, KPI is basically a performance indicator. So an indicator of performance. So a KPI, usually the way it works is um, management tend to set performance expectations, targets. So those are really what KPIs are sort of linked to. So where do you target? So for example, KPIs could be many different things. So target of sales could be one KPI. In an airline, number of seats sold could be a KPI. So things like that. So that's what a KPI is. Now, very, very true. So the person, what they've said here is there are pros and cons to KPIs, which remove the joys at work. So because you're sort of forced to meet a target, yes, it's not joyful to do that. But what it does is it offers you something to work towards, right? It gives you ambition. It gives you a goal to work towards. It now comes down to, it depends on your leadership. It depends on your management and leadership on how they approach the whole thing. So if you are heavily penalized for not meeting a KPI, that's too much stick. There's not enough carrot. There's not enough incentive, stick and carrot. There's not enough incentive for you to see the joy in having a KPI. Of course, are you meeting your target? You're not meeting your target. You get the stick, not the carrot. That's the general take on things. And it's suggested here that having KPIs in place may see millennials jumps to other jobs. Maybe not. I don't know. But if millennials or I actually feel bad about this because it comes down to talking about millennials as them and everyone else as us. So if anybody in the workforce is jumping to another job because they have to meet a target, then I think that's something that they really have to reflect on themselves, on if they can't meet targets, they don't want to meet targets, or is it that the targets are too high? Are they unachievable? In which case, then you should be comfortable enough to discuss with your leadership to review those targets, to review those KPIs. So that's what I have to share about that.
Yeah. Sometimes KPI, it's also linked back to your job scope, because end of the day, when you're interviewed, you are hired for the job, you still have your job scopes. Okay, so that is one. And the next thing is, as a leader or as a manager, right, of course deadlines will be there, especially when you're auditor or a tax agent. The things that you have to meet the deadline, it could be a $1 million job or stuff. The thing is that how do you portray your leadership, how, whether you get the right resource, okay, or you get the right matters done first, first You focus on the important tasks first. Okay, and the thing is that because your KPI end of the day relates back to your job scope. That is one. Okay, and for you to move forward your career progression, you have to meet this job scope so that your superior can actually analyze, feel that you're fit for to move up the career ladder. All right, if should you feel you are not fit for that KPI, then there is an issue whether are you fit for the job, or whether is it the deadline is an issue. All right, so another thing is it's not only the deadline, it's also the resource, whether you have the right resource. So it's something for you to discuss with your
Yes.
superior. All right. Sure. Sometimes, when I was in audit, it's the same thing, especially
Yeah.
April 30th is a crucial deadlines for the listed companies, okay, to submit the auditor report, to sign the auditor report. So, usually we don't get leaves approved during the last 2 weeks of April, because the resources are short. So you have to utilize the resources. That's one. And again, sometimes it comes back to your planning, your initial stage, how you plan your job and execute it. That's one way. All right. And like what Praveen said, the communication with your superior, that's crucial. So at least make sure your superior is aware how are you progressing. Don't go at the last minute or 29 April and say you can't submit the file. Obviously your superior would not be happy. So at least keep him informed. There should be a constant communications involved. So at least people are aware on what's the progress and what's going on. So because from my experience, what I felt,
And to
because
add to that, Maya,
yeah,
that is if you are
the thing is that
so that is
go ahead.
absolutely true, and communication both.
Mm.
Sorry, you go. You finish.
Oh, okay. So let's say if when I was in EY, Ernst and Young, and Deloitte, so I used to have this constant communication with my juniors. So they felt that the previous managers just shut themselves into the room. They expect you to go to the room and talk to them. All right. But nevertheless, I tried to change that culture. I actually go to my juniors' desk, so they felt as if they were appreciated. And when I was working with them, they felt I was part of the team. So they felt the sense of belonging. All right, that the teamwork is crucial. So make sure when you're in a team, you maintain the chemistry. That's one way. And of course, the communication. Make sure they feel you like a buddy, not as a boss or a general in an army kind of thing. All right. So people don't like master slave or like an army style of a leadership. They feel more like a buddy style of a leadership.
Right.
Yeah, probably.
Feel valued. Yeah. So yeah, as you're saying, so it's building that trusted relationship, right? So that's what it comes down to.
True.
There are one or two more
Okay.
questions. We're going to wrap up soon, are we?
Yeah, correct. So
So one more question. So okay, there's someone saying, someone sharing their view about the role of mentor does not end with technical support. Fresh graduates may be well trained in new devices, techniques, but the role of the mentor is to ensure that fresh graduates continue to thrive in a competitive environment and provide emotional support as well. Thanks for that. Next question, and I think last question there. How much our Chettiar youngsters are prepared to take up challenges? That is the $1,000,000 question.
yeah.
So that is indeed a question. It's indeed a $1,000,000 question. No idea. But I do think that we need to. I certainly would like some guidance on this very topic. So I think we are, as I said, when we spoke about before. I think there's a lot more we can do to encourage our family members, our children, our grandchildren, to come along the journey with us in our family trades. Because I think when one business ends at every generation and a new generation starts the next business, the life of that generation is only limited to the proprietor,
Yep.
which is a sad reality. So I absolutely think there's opportunity there, and each of us need to look at doing something to bring our families on board the journey. If we are parents with children about that age, we should start having those conversations. And if we are thinking of starting our own business or something like this, we should think about how our children can come on board. But it shouldn't be forced, right? Because I think that will have the undesired outcome. You might actually turn them away unintentionally. But something to be thought about, absolutely.
Okay.
Your thoughts, Naya?
Yeah. For me, some of the youngsters, when they see these success stories, they tend to actually emulate them. They want to follow them. So we have good entrepreneurs, especially when you come to the IBCN uh, conference, you actually have a lot of youngsters, youths. They also have their own companies, okay, startups and stuff. So they tend to have things in their mind, and of course, the parents actually allowing them to make mistakes. That's a crucial point here. A lot of parents think that, what if my son makes a mistake, and what if he
Mm,
lose? So the thing is that, are you able to take the risk? Okay, so that's one thing. And next thing is, are you willing to learn from your mistakes and move forward?
mm,
It's not changing your destination, it's changing your direction. Okay, as long you reach the
mm,
destination. Okay, so you try out different ways, different alternatives,
mm, mm,
so that you can reach your destination. Right. Okay, so we actually almost to the end of the session. All right. So thanks a lot, Praveen, for sharing the session. It was definitely a fruitful one. Actually, I didn't feel the entire 60 minutes just fly. Right. So it was great to have all of you, all of your support. Okay.
my
So
pleasure.
it's great. And thanks a lot for all the audience from India, Bangladesh, Thailand,
Can
Singapore. Yeah, there is one from Bangladesh also, right? And there's also one from UK, so it's great, and from New Zealand, so that's fantastic. And okay, our next session, our Picnic with Panic Series 8, will be in 2 weeks' time on the 28th June. We will have two student leaders, former student leaders, will be sharing their session or experience on being a student leaders. All right, so it'll be a different topic on leadership. All right. So thanks a lot for the session. I will actually upload this video to the YouTube, all right, and I'll send you on the link. So thanks a lot for the support. Should you have any other suggestions, any other topics that I can bring in future, do let me know. I can try to get the speakers also. All right. So with that, thanks a lot for all your support. Till then, I'll see you from 2 weeks from now. Thank you and welcome. Welcome.